Ooh, I'm getting my third power now. Am I transforming into a mecha? God dang, is this game so cool. Hey everyone, and welcome to ZeroRanger, a relatively modern indie release that is undoubtedly a love letter to shmup fans everywhere. From the stunning retro graphics to the ridiculously good music you'll be hearing in the background, ZeroRanger is a snapshot of some of the best this honestly quite niche genre has to offer, with some surprisingly good storytelling and a very lenient entry curve for newcomers. SHUMPS, for those who aren't familiar, is a shorthand abbreviation of shoot 'em ups, a genre that was incredibly popular back in the day. Due to their inherent coin-guzzling arcade style of gameplay, it was a kind of game where you control a tiny character, usually a ship, and shoot down hordes of enemies, all the while dodging tons of bullets all across the screen, with any single hit meaning instant death. We have all heard of the classics like Gradius, R-Type, Space Invaders, Ikaruga, and so forth. While shmups have largely fallen out of favor from mainstream media over the years, it has found a home in the indie and doujin scenes with series like Touhou, Dondopachi, Cuphead, and today's topic, ZeroRanger. ZeroRanger is undoubtedly a love letter to classic shmups over the years, but also retro games in general. Outside the incredibly obvious sprite aesthetic they have going on, plenty of the songs and victory themes have classic Konami inspirations, or even from other older games. For me personally, the two things I think that are most important when it comes to a shoot 'em up is how tight the gameplay is, and how good the music accompanying the game is as well. The first one is obvious. Gameplay is exceedingly important, and movement being incredibly tight becomes vital when there are a billion bullets on screen, and you have to make tiny pixel-perfect movements to dodge the hair cracks between the bullets. Of course, the shooting also needs to be cathartic, and feel like they have an impact with visual cues and sound effects, so that the players themselves feel amazing when the bullets land. As for music, however, I think this is just as important. The music is what gets the players' blood pumping and excited for the gameplay. More than that though, the music for a shoot 'em up is what helps draw the player into a rhythm, where once you get drawn into the game, that's when you almost start to see all the bullets move into slow motion, where you start to make movements that seem suicidal at first, but you just instinctively know will get you to dodge that perfect pixel gap. I think it's actually very similar to a rhythm game, where you start getting into the game or song, and everything just flows, until you inevitably slip up and ruin that concentration. And obviously, an absolutely banging music score does a much better job of drawing players into the game than a subpar one. As you can probably imagine from how I'm talking, ZeroRanger's gameplay and soundtrack are both absolutely fantastic. The gameplay, outside of just being really tight and action-packed bullet hell, also has a couple of features unique to ZeroRanger. At the end of the first 3 stages, you're given a choice between 2 power-ups, which once obtained, you can switch on the fly at any time to utilize. What's pretty special about these power-ups in ZeroRanger is that they aren't necessarily better than your default weapon, but rather gives you more options in tackling a stage, and dealing with enemy positioning and bullets. The fact that the game also forces you into choosing one of 2 power-ups 3 times, gives you more reason to run through multiple playthroughs. These power-ups range from useful, like being able to fire in multiple directions or even behind you, to charge shots that eliminate bullets and slow down bullets while dealing massive damage, homing bullets that fire after scanning, to the cool transforming robot aspect, which lets you bust out a sword or drill, depending on the power-up which I showed off in the beginning. All of these power-ups have their own uses and are incredibly easy to swap between in-game, which is probably the best part. Switching to the mecha form is also incredibly satisfying, where when you see the opportunity to run in swords blazing, and you just start wailing on the enemy. I also think the decision to make the sword push back bullets, as opposed to straight eliminating them outside the initial swing, was an incredible one, especially how the pushback gets worse as the more bullets accumulate. Outside of making the sword form not be completely overpowered, the sense of just sheer hype you get from swinging your sword while holding back a ton of bullets, pixels away from ending your life, is quite exhilarating. This is then compounded by the fact that the game lets you pick between 2 main ships, Type B and Type C, both of which have their own variations on the 6 different powers in the game, giving ZeroRanger that much more replayability value and contributing greatly to the intended way of playing the game. Speaking of amazing, the pixel animation on everything in ZeroRanger can be best described as clean. Granted, I might be a bit biased since I really do love the retro aesthetic, so whenever a game can pull off this visual look, all the while bring a modern smoothness to everything that would have been impossible back in the day, I'm all for it. While the entirety of ZeroRanger's look is based on the color scheme of green and orange, everything is drawn so distinctively different from each other that it looks far more beautiful than many other sprite games which actually use the full range of the color spectrum. Stages are clearly distinct from each other, and the same goes for the background, some of which are just awe-inspiring to see, even when some of them are very incredibly simple. Normal enemies and bosses are all vastly different from each other, and doesn't fall into the trap of reusing colors, which I mean, ZeroRanger would have a hard time doing so anyway, since they only have 2 colors to work with. While the 2 main ships aren't anything too special, I think the mecha form you get at the end of stage 3 is quite slick, especially the animation when you pulls out the sword. Woo! This clean as all heck retro art and high octane gameplay from ZeroRanger is then backed by one of the best soundtracks I've heard in some time. As I mentioned earlier, in my opinion, the goal of any soundtrack in a shoot 'em up is to complement the frenetic gameplay going on, but more than that, it is meant to draw the player into the rhythm of the game. A cheesy way to put it, I suppose, is that the music is meant to help you get into the zone. Like the moment in a rhythm game where you can just feel all the notes happening, or in a fighting game where your mind clearly runs through all the possibilities. And the music in ZeroRanger does just that, by being all absolute bangers. Plenty of the BGMs throughout ZeroRanger are either straight amazing on their own, or do a fantastic job of hyping the absolute heck out of the player. Nearly every boss theme and stage theme are blood pumpers on their own. My favorite musical moment though, would have to be the moment you access stage 4 for the first time. It's just a series of rising melodies that progressively get more and more hype as you get further. Then it pauses for a sec, and just when you think it couldn't get any more crazy, it goes one step further. All of these extremely exhilarating songs also make the much more poignant musical themes and moments in the game all that more distinctive when they show up, because speaking of which, you might notice that at the beginning, I described ZeroRanger as having surprisingly good storytelling. I've said this time and time again, but I'm always a huge sucker for novel ways of telling a story in a video game, and especially all the more so when it comes entirely unexpected and out of left field for me. And let me say that when it comes to shoot 'em ups, storytelling isn't exactly one of their strongest points. While there are the occasional few that does try their hand at telling a compelling story, usually for the most part it kinda takes a backseat to the whole coin guzzling frenetic arcade style gameplay. I'm not going to say that this story is way more important than the fantastic gameplay ZeroRanger already has, but color me surprised when I found out that this entirely unassuming indie game actually has a decent metafiction plot. Underneath the absolute corniness when it comes to the names of the characters, like green, orange, grapefruit, type B, and type C, hides a simple but poignant plot about sacrifice and persistence, wrapped around some wonderful bits of metafiction fun. The way ZeroRanger never outright tells you how to advance the plot or get closer to the true ending, but rather lets you discover how to do so yourself, is beautiful in its own way. Now, I can't really talk about the specifics of it without obviously going into spoilers, which I totally plan on talking at least a tiny bit about. Before that though, if anything I said about ZeroRanger so far has appealed to you, the absolutely fantastic soundtrack, the superb gameplay, the mysteriousness of the hidden story underneath it all, then go ahead and pick it up. It's only about like $12 on the Steam store, and I think it's well worth the price of admission. Now, this is of course under assumption that the idea of playing a shoot 'em up sounds like a fun time to you. If you had always wanted to give this genre a shot, but was daunted by the prospect of actually playing one, then I think ZeroRanger is an excellent beginning entry, where the game lets you continue from the beginning of any stage, as opposed to say like Toho, where in order to get the best ending, you have to complete the entire game on one continue. If you enjoyed this look at ZeroRanger, the like button is down there as always. Subscribe if you want to support the channel, I appreciate it. Notification bell and all buttons to keep up to date on when my next video shows up, and I do have a Twitter as well in case you want to follow me on that. Anyways, yeah, let's get straight into the spoiler section. So I never actually talked about the premise of ZeroRanger, did I? Well, in short, it's pretty simple. You play as either the pilot of Type B Rib, something like that, or Type C Decker, with your main mission being one deemed impossible, to eliminate Green Orange, an evil force who seeks to conquer Earth, as well as Grapefruit, Type A who has gone berserk and switched sides after contact with the enemy. Fairly simple enough, except there are some quite weird messages that seem to come when you game over. While half the time it's some ridiculous fact about fruit, mainly oranges, sometimes it's as if the continue screen is talking to you. Normally I like to just reveal everything that happened in the story during the spoiler section, but since I feel like ZeroRanger, the story isn't the focus anyways, I'll just highlight the things I couldn't talk about without touching upon them. I think the reveal that each of these fighters, Type A, Type B, Type C, each having their own pilots that were actually their own characters with personalities, was pretty unexpected. Even though nearly all of ZeroRanger has no dialogue, the little bit of it when Mito or Dory is interacting with Grapefruit's pilot during the Dream Trap sequence was surprisingly touching. How you realize that the pilots of Type B and Type C aren't just some random mook, but someone with a connection to the Type A's pilot, and feels sadness towards the fact that they can't ever see her again, but at the same time determination to bring everything to an end. I also mentioned the fact that ZeroRanger has 2 ships, and the choice to choose 3 out of 6 abilities during a single playthrough, which works greatly for the intended way of playing, and that is because at the end of the true ending, the player is offered a choice. This choice is one that if you've played a metafiction kind of story before, are probably more than familiar with. Think Nier or Totono. That of course being the one where you're asked to make a decision with your actual save file on the line. In ZeroRanger's case, the computer that is now freed from the control of Green-Orange tells you that the alien forces have wiped out all of humanity, and the only way to avert the disaster, you have to go back in time. However, you only have one chance, upon which you embark on the final stage of the game with whatever amount of lives you saved up until that point. If you fail this final sequence, your story progress gets reset entirely and you start from the very beginning again. And honestly, this whole sequence was probably made with the intention that you would fail it the first time, because the first time you reach this sequence, you were probably out of lives and barely scraped by to beat the final boss, so unless you perfectly dodge everything, chances are you will fail. So once you get the story progress reset, you run through ZeroRanger again, probably using the ship you didn't use the first playthrough, and getting the power-ups you didn't get last time. The first time I got to this point, I was a little peeved, but upon playing the game again, I kinda got it. The first playthrough of ZeroRanger is meant for you to acclimate yourself to the game, make use of the fact that you have infinite chances to restart each stage and get better and better. That way on your second playthrough, you can get through all the stages losing much less lives now that you're more experienced. Then when you get to the final sequence of the game again, you have a much bigger safety net this time around. Most shoot-em-ups are made with the intention of the player running through the game multiple times, perfecting their gameplay. It's just with ZeroRanger, this idea is inbuilt into the story and design of the game. And that was ZeroRanger! Overall, a fantastic modern love letter to shoot-em-ups, a genre that I'm a pretty big fan of and always enjoy playing every now and then. Even if you've seen the spoiler section, I don't think it changes whether you can enjoy ZeroRanger or not, since ZeroRanger is all about the gameplay and music, with the story being the surprise cherry on top of the cake that you weren't expecting. It's a lot of fun, and again, if you enjoy shoot-em-ups or even thought about getting into one, but was intimidated by how they look, ZeroRanger is an excellent entry point. I said it earlier, but like, subscribe, notification, all that stuff is there as always. I will probably end up talking about Touhou at some point, so look forward to that if that sounds up your alley. Here are 2 more of my videos on the left, my Twitter handle in case you want to follow me there, and with that, I'll see you later. Till next time!